I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
Homelessness is a national crisis, and here in New York City, tens of thousands of people, including children, are sleeping in shelters every night. But the numbers alone don't tell the whole story. The people do.
Thank you. God bless.
Garrett lives on Midtown streets and outside the city shelter system because he dislikes bureaucracy. He relies on soup kitchens and donations for food.
Because it's all politics. It's all the bottom line. They don't want to see our type. Neighborhoods are changing. You know.
A former bike messenger, he tells me about his biggest challenges.
Just making money and trying to, well, when the weather starts getting creepier, you know, trying to stay warm. Now it's a city for the rich, and, you know, that's it.
For many of us, seeing apparently homeless people brings up a mix of feelings: sadness, frustration, and the question, why does it have to be that way? The recent murders of 4 homeless men in Chinatown underscore the danger. On Broadway, William tells me it's a constant fear, especially since he was attacked.
They're on 34th Street,
Right.
7th Avenue. They came and kicked me, and I couldn't sleep.
That's horrible.
You know, those chances that you have to take.
This retired security guard tells me that since he walks with a cane, he tries to avoid anyone acting disturbed.
I tend not to go near somebody that I think that they're homeless or something like that, because I don't know where they be coming from.
Right.
But there's a lot of them that got issues up there in their head, and they might take it out on you.
He was in the shelter system and tells me he's glad to be out of it and living in a semi-private room. He gets some social security, but not enough. He makes ends meet on his milk crate on Broadway, accepting food and money donations and doing crossword puzzles to pass the time.
I'm much better than where I used to be when I was in the shelter.
Right.
Okay? Like I rated like I'm 100% better.
Well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Let's get more perspective on this from our panel. Joining me is Melody. She was formerly homeless. She works in the financial industry, and she's the founder of the organization No Voice Unheard. Melody, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Also with us is MZ. He was formerly homeless. He's been for many years now a street outreach counselor helping people. MZ, thank you so much for being with us.
Not a problem.
We appreciate it. Also joining us is Dr. Elisa English. She's a clinical therapist. She's worked for more than a decade with the homeless population. Dr. Elisa, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Elisa, you're one of the specialists who go out and help the city get an idea of what the homeless population looks like, where it is, what's going on with it, how many there are. What have you seen the last time you did that?
Well, you know, let's put this in context. You know, it's about 500,000 people homeless in America at any point in time. So we do a point in time count. What you usually find on the streets when you're actually doing those counts, you're looking at things like substance use issues, mental health, you know, people who have been disconnected from their families. The opioid crisis has really affected our neighborhoods across the country in a really horrible way. And so you're not really seeing like what homelessness really looks like. Actually, homelessness is, in many ways, it looks like all of us. You know, it's all of us are really a paycheck from being homeless, right? And so it's important for us to put everything in context. It's not just about like those individuals who are on the street who actually need a certain type of recovery help or supportive help to get them to a next space in life, but it's more about how are we dealing with the policies that impact and affect those who are homeless?
And we're going to get into those policies as well. MZ, tell us a little bit about your situation. You were in a shelter at one point, you told me.
Yes, I was in a shelter at one point. And when I was in the shelter, the one thing that I seen, there was a lack of compassion. There was a lack of compassion. There was a lack of understanding. People didn't care who you were, where you were from. It was like an assembly line. You're here, do this, do that. It was just no compassion. Nobody sat down and talked to you and made you understand that, you know, what was going on, what was the process, what can we do, how can we do it. It was just numbers just pushing you right along.
Psychologically, where were you at in your life that you ended up in that situation?
Bad relationship, poor decisions, and to be honest, I thought shelter had become a part of the urban culture. You know, going to a shelter, everybody was saying, yo, just go to a shelter, just go to a shelter. And it became a part of the urban culture, and I accepted that as my reality. You know, today I know that's not a reality. That's not something that somebody should accept willingly.
Right.
There should be other alternatives. It shouldn't be, he turned 21, just send him to the shelter. It shouldn't be that.
Right, if they age out of the system, like foster care you're talking about.
Right. It shouldn't be, let's put them in a shelter. We should put them elsewhere because people don't see how horrible shelters are.
Melody, one of the things that we don't see is we don't see the number of people who are middle class working and then something happens to them, and then, as Dr. Elisa said, you're one paycheck away from being out on the streets. Tell us about your situation, because you had a thriving, and you do now again,
Right.
which is great, and congratulations on rebuilding your life after everything that you've gone through these last several years. But you were making a really good salary, and tell us what happened and how you ended up in a women's shelter.
Well, I was working corporate and I lost my job. I was wrongfully terminated, and during that point, I had no source of income. I couldn't pay the rent. I was about $1,000 short from what I needed, and they evicted me. And at that point, I lost everything. Being that I don't have a strong family support system, I am my only support system. I landed in the shelter system, and when I landed there, it was a reality for me. Because making so much money, I never realized that I had to save money just in case for a rainy day. And that's when reality hit for me, where I got to see a different side of life I wasn't used to.
And then in terms of your circumstances, because you were in a relationship, and
Yes.
you and your partner had the apartment, right? Then he left. So you're trying to carry on the rent for yourself, by yourself, which you're doing, or you were doing until you lost your job. In terms of your safety, your feeling of safety when you went into the shelter, what was that like?
Well, when I first went in, it was ironic that I was told that my safety was going to be at jeopardy. I was going to the 4th floor and there were no cameras. The lady that was at intake, she didn't even want to register me. She told me I was too beautiful to be in a place like that. But I explained to her I had no other alternative but to be there. So she advised there were no cameras. There were 20 women per room. My first night was very tough. I was threatened. It was kind of feeling like I was in prison. And I've never been to prison, so it was a new reality for me. So it's kind of, you adapt to your environment immediately. It's very unsafe. There are no cameras. You become a number. You don't even have a name anymore once you step in there.
Is it like survival, basically?
Yes.
You go into survival mode? Is that an
Yes.
exaggeration, or that's the accuracy?
No, that's what it is. It was like you were walking yourself into prison every day at 10 o'clock at night, knowing that your safety was at jeopardy. I couldn't even sleep. And at the same time, I was looking for jobs. So I would wake up at 6 in the morning, get dressed, and go right into a corporate meeting looking for a position, and have to, keep a smile on my face and keep going, knowing that I was going through that situation at night. So it was very hard for me.
And try to keep that hidden from you.
Yes.
Do you think there's people that we all of us encounter on a daily basis in the course of doing our jobs and living our lives and everything, that probably don't have a place to sleep that night, that we don't even know about it because they're just...
Yes, I think people are very ashamed to say that they're struggling, to say that they may be homeless or may be facing eviction, and it's something that we need to be very clear and very truthful within ourselves and say, this is what I'm going through, because there is help, but there's not much help for the middle class working people
Right.
as myself, because I was told from the start that I was not going to get any assistance, being that I make a lot of money.
Even though that was in the past.
Right.
So
I
that-
didn't qualify for anything. I was just there to sleep and have a bed.
Because they went on your last year's income, which was a good,
Correct.
really high income.
Yes.
That's
And in
crazy.
New York City, we have a housing first model, which means as long as you have a roof over your head, your house, then you're no longer, quote unquote,
Eligible
home,
for all
right?
those things.
Right.
We're going to talk about eligibility and who needs what, and are they getting the services they need. That's coming up on Street Soldiers. We'll be right back.
It's a traumatic experience. A lot of people don't understand the trauma that people experience going through the shelter system.
MJ, in terms of the services, because you're out there on the streets, going around, helping people connect with what's available. What is available for them? If you find somebody on the streets, tell us what the encounter is like.
Well, the first thing, if you find somebody on the street, you have to ascertain if they're having mental health problems or if they're having substance issues. And most people don't want to go and address mental health issues.
Right.
They don't want to address the mental health issues. They'll try to, continue sedating themselves with substances. And above all that, I want to make a point that a lot of people don't want to go to these hospitals because they feel ostracized. They don't feel like people the stigma with homelessness. They have so many stigmas around it that they talk to one another. Homeless people talk to one another. I don't want to call I don't want to use the name, but there's a hospital in the Bronx that you can't find a homeless person to go to that particular hospital because of the way they treat the clients. They walk through the door. I've taken them there myself. They'll walk through the door. The receptionists will frown at them. You know, people will treat them like they're trash, and nobody wants to go there. So the services, there are some services, but the services are limited. You have to find a service where people can really relate to them. Not where they're just trying to swipe the Medicaid card, but where people are going to relate to them, welcome in, and really assist them.
Dr. Lisa, are there enough treatment facilities? Because one of the things we've been seeing are a lot more people who appear in a state of extreme distress. I don't have
Right.
you could give the
Yeah,
clinical
there's-
definition, but you know,
yeah.
it's just, you can tell they're not right. Something's very, very wrong.
Well, you know, recovery and to receive services is self-directed. So you have to be willing to accept those services. I believe that there are many services related to recovery and healthcare and, you know, medical services, but people also have to want it. And when you've gotten to a point where you've lost hope and you've lost a sense of dignity and trust for systems that have been sort of given the charge to care for you, you no longer want to engage in those services and receive the support that is available to you. I think when we're talking about mental health, a lot of times we sort of lump mental health and substance use as that is the end all and be all to homelessness, and it's just not.
Well, no, obviously
Yeah,
obviously
it's
not with MJ, and
absolutely
obviously
not.
with Melody. Melody, in terms of you, the safety issue is a really big thing for a lot of homeless people. Were you in fear for your life there? Were you in fear?
I was in fear for my life with the people that were staying there, and as well as with the security guards, because I had got into an altercation with a security guard, and she got really aggressive. You know, and I just think, like I told her, we all live from check to check. Unless you have a lot of money saved, you can land in the same position.
She could be on the other side.
Correct. And I think we all have to remain that we have to be humane, because I do believe with the power of love, it can heal a lot. You know, if we just spread love and we give love when someone approaches us in that situation, it can change a lot, because any of us can land in that situation.
Definitely, and help erase the stigma.
Yes.
MJ, in terms of the violence and in terms of the safety issue, we were all shocked when we heard about the murder of the 4 homeless men in Chinatown, because there they were in Chinatown because they had been kind of pushed down the Bowery. They were there sleeping. It was about 2:00 in the morning, you know, on a Saturday morning, and then they were brutally, very, very viciously attacked. What was your reaction when you heard about that story? Were you surprised? Did you say,
Nah, I wasn't
you know
surprised.
what?
I
Why?
wasn't surprised because one thing that I learned as an assessment specialist, I seen that a lot of people were coming to the facility I was working at from prison. A lot of them were coming from prison because they didn't have where to go, and if it wasn't that, a lot of people were being released from New York State Mental Health Hospital. And they were being released from there. Family didn't want them. They had no place to go, so they would send them to the shelter. But they were sending them to the shelter, and I didn't have a folder telling me that this person was schizoaffective, they had bipolar disorder, that they had suicidal ideations. I didn't have any of that information. People were coming there, and I had to assess them and put them in areas that I felt were right for them, and then they got assessed again, and hopefully they got to the right place. But the system absolutely doesn't tell you who you're putting into a shelter. And one thing I want to point out, unbeknownst to a lot of people, there's a lot of gangs in shelters. A lot of these people can go and stay with a family member, but they'd rather stay there and sell drugs, make money, and do whatever they do. I'm not saying that applies to everybody, but I'm saying there's numerous of places. Most people you talk to, if you ask them if they're in a big shelter, there's gang members there. And the gang members pretty much control that shelter.
Well, homeless people are also very vulnerable, and so people prey on them. So it's a space for people who are selling drugs and doing all sorts of illicit acts to kind of go to have a sort of concentrated population to engage in those activities. I think, unfortunately, when it comes to the homeless population, many of them do suffer from certain mental illnesses that aren't necessarily treated.
Melody, your situation was very clear.
It was
'Cause-
very rock bottom.
And so tell us what happened. So
Yeah.
how did you come to that particular shelter? And take us through step by step, if you don't mind.
Well, that was the largest women's shelter. I'm single with no kids, so that was the only place for me to go. and they would assess me after 90 days to see if I qualified for a voucher, which I didn't. So at that point, I realized I was just there to sleep. There was no assistance that they can give me. They couldn't guide me anywhere. I basically had to just save the money for my apartment to get out of that situation.
But then tell us what the day is like. Do you have to, because some of the
Case
shelters you have to
management
check
support,
in.
Yes.
What was there case
HRA, they
management?
have
management.
HRA there
Mm-hmm.
that runs your name into the system. They put your income in there to see what you qualify, and once they put the income in there, it would generate which voucher you would qualify for.
Meaning voucher, meaning which program?
City FEPs they have links.
T-Bra.
Yeah, they have a couple.
Program, and you didn't
Yes.
qualify for anything because you
No.
have been making too much money.
Correct.
So tell us what your day is like. Like, do you have to go through a metal detector to
Metal
walk?
detector, as if you're going into prison. You have to give your number. You don't give your name. You go upstairs. It's a walk up. There's no elevators. It's an armory, so it's about 300 steps before you get to where you need to go. Once you're in there, there's no cameras. There's no security on the floor. You're basically every man for themselves.
So how did you, in that situation, and you have to be out on the street at certain hours too, right?
6 a.m. You're there at 10 for
At
your
night.
bed count, correct? And then 6 a.m. you have to get up and leave.
And those are usually the assessment centers, right?
Right. Yes, the assessment center.
Yeah, the assessment centers.
So how long were you at the assessment center?
2 months.
2 months, because you didn't qualify for any of these other programs. And then what was it like for you when you had to get dressed and go into, you come into Midtown and get into a corporate environment and try to convince them that, yes, I'm the person that you can trust to manage your money and your payroll?
That's when my belief in God became strong, because that's the only way I was able to do it. Because there were times I didn't even eat, and I would save my money just to travel and face these interviews and pray to God that there was an opportunity for me to get myself out of it when I was in.
And do you put your stuff? Do you have like a little locker there you can leave stuff?
Yeah, there's a locker that people pick. You go to the bathroom and someone will take whatever's on your bed. I mean, my bed was kicked the first night there, and I was told that she ran the place and this is how things were going to happen. My first night there, so I had a bed bug on my neck. I mean, I had no pillow. They don't want to give you a blanket. You're basically sleeping in your clothes and sneakers on the bed. It's crazy.
So it really can mess with your head.
It can. As a woman, you would really lose value within yourself being in there if you don't have a strong support system.
And it really does go back to a support system.
It
we
does.
all really need a support system, because when we all are facing these very difficult challenges in life, it's important to have someone that we can talk to, that we can count on, that we can go to help support us through that. Because when we're relying on these systems that, for whatever reason, aren't really working well for us, it creates all sorts of mental health issues and challenges.
MJ, when you hear Melody's story, does that sound typical to you?
Absolutely, it's a traumatic experience. A lot of people don't understand the trauma that people experience going through the shelter system. Her saying that, you go through and first thing you see is a metal detector. And I used to hear it a lot. People used to always say, yo, this is just like jail. This is just like jail. And it's ironic that we would model our shelter system after the jail system.
Right. Even in the family shelters, you have to go through metal detectors.
Exactly.
And the kids
Exactly.
do.
Rules and
And the
regulations.
intervention was there designed to help deal with the safety issues that they
Right.
were experiencing before the metal detectors. So
Right,
it just
when
makes
people
it,
were having
the
problems.
response is never good enough.
I want to thank you all for being with us for this episode of Street Soldiers, helping us understand this enormous problem, and also that there are some solutions. But we definitely need more. Melody, thank you so much for being
you
with
so
us. We
much,
appreciate
Lisa.
it, and appreciate your courage in speaking out
Yeah,
about your
thank you.
personal experience. MJ, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it, sharing your experience as well. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
And Dr. Elisa, always great to have you and get that big picture and therapeutic view. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me for this episode of Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.